Now, South Africa's Finance Minister, Pravin Gordhan, believes Africa will have unbeatable growth for the next 2 decades. But questions remain on how South Africa will take advantage of this growth and ensure equal distribution. Latest figures released yesterday show the country lost 100,000 jobs between the 4th quarter of 2012 and the 1st quarter of this year. Joining me now on the line from Cape Town is, of course, the Finance Minister of South Africa, Mr. Pravin Gordhan. Minister, thank you so much for taking time out to meet with us. You are incredibly optimistic, and you have listed the reasons why, of course, Africa is poised for this growth. But if one takes South Africa, which is the largest and most diversified economy, does the potential for growth automatically deliver on pressing issues like jobs? We know that at a time when South Africa had quite desirable growth figures, we didn't have the kind of jobs that we need. So how do we make sure that growth is in fact transformative and does speak to issues such as unemployment, inequality, and of course poverty?
Well, that's a question that can take 2 days to answer, but thank you very much for having me on your show. I think what we are saying is that, firstly, if one looks at the global environment, one finds that for the last 150 years or so, the prime spot remained with what we today call developed countries. For the last 20 years or so, countries like India and China have been at the forefront, and certainly post the 2009 recession, these countries have provided, some say 50%, some say 2/3 of the global growth that we are actually seeing. And if you look at the aging population, if you look at the low levels of growth in the developed part of the world by and large, it's very logical that Africa now begins to become more and more attractive. 1 billion people, notwithstanding the fact that we have 54 countries on the African continent, a very young population, over 60% of arable land and productive land across the globe belongs on the African continent as well. So, and what I've sensed, and many others have sensed for the last few months, is an increasing interest in investment in Africa, firstly, but secondly, interest in South Africa as an important hub from which to operate in Africa, in which to base headquarters for foreign companies, but also to begin to create greater productive capability in South Africa as well. Over and above that, South Africa is, if you like, a strategic development partner with countries like Nigeria, Kenya, and others as well, a role that we need to fill in a lot more and develop a lot more so that we can give joint impetus to growth and jobs and development on the African market.
Minister Gordhan, I think you make the case for why Africa is, of course, considered to be, on that cusp. The case is a very well-known one. The key, of course, is what to do to realize that. From where you're sitting, what is the World Economic Forum Africa meant to come up with that will actually, deliver on this promise and make it very practical, particularly if one thinks of young people as the driver in many cases. And then, of course, also the fact that we have severe issues around inequality. South Africa is often referred to as one of the most unequal societies in the world. So yes, we do have all of these, drivers of growth, but what needs to happen so that growth is inclusive?
Well, the first general point is that Africa has a wonderful opportunity to provide a new model for inclusive growth, as you correctly point out, and combining inclusive growth with job creation and all-round development. What do we do and what are we doing in many different ways across the African continent and in South Africa? Firstly, the focus on infrastructure and its direct impact on improving growth potential of our country in South Africa, but also elsewhere in the continent. Infrastructure as a key provider of linkages between African regions and African countries to improve inter-African trade, and infrastructure on the social side which will provide better facilities for education, health, and living conditions of our people. Secondly, economic diversification, which is one of the sub-themes of the WEF Africa program. And by this we mean begin to move away from the dependence on commodities, agricultural or mineral. Secondly, ensure that, and all the leaders in Africa are in fact saying this, move away from exporting these minerals to finding some opportunity for value adding to these commodities. Thirdly, also begin to look at regional integration, not only in the sense that we build infrastructure that connects us as countries, but creating regional value chains, as the Asians have certainly done, and many countries are beginning to do that as well. And part of economic diversification is certainly for the next few years is a spirit of complementarity. How can we help each other grow rather than just compete with each other?
Minister, I think that is a really interesting point, and of course we saw that with Goodluck Jonathan and President Jacob Zuma, his counterpart, speaking to that. But one of the big players in the Nigerian economy was quite critical of, for example, a very key part of our economic strategy around black economic empowerment, saying that, you know, it's a forced marriage and it's not necessarily the desirable thing. Your quick response to some of the concerns raised by players, particularly from Nigeria, around the desirability of black economic empowerment as one of the ways in which to drive inclusive growth?
Well, firstly, you know, some of the ventures we enter into work well and some don't work well. And so I'm not sure whether in this particular instance there's something that went wrong. Secondly, more broadly, all of us are confronted with the issue of wealth redistribution and wealth generation within our societies. And we ourselves in South Africa are looking for alternate models where it is not just a few people who benefit from these processes. It'll be called BEE in South Africa, it'll be called other things in other parts of Africa. But the key element or objective that we are trying to target at is how do you get a wider spread of wealth, which in itself then begins to address the issues of inequality and poverty as well. So in that sense, I think South Africans are fairly self-critical, and as a continent we need to look at different ways of actually encouraging the right kind of economic partnerships, and above all, the right kind of social contracts, which will ensure that all players, workers, investors, business operators, and governments and citizens more broadly actually benefit from economic growth and development.